Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. As Annie said, my name is Larbi Belkhit, and I'm an industry analyst at ABI Research, focusing on RAN infrastructure. And I'm joined here by Abdel and Devang, and I'll let them introduce themselves. Abdel, would you like to go first?
Thank you, Larbi, and hi, everyone. I'm Abdel Bagegni. I'm a technical program manager at the Telecom Infra project. Our mission within TIP is to accelerate Open RAN deployments, and I think this is probably one of the exciting opportunities that I could promote the acceleration of Open RAN. Over to you, Devang.
Hello, I'm Devang Solanky. I have 20 years of experience in radio access network. I'm currently working with Vodafone Group, and my last 6 years of work is around Open RAN. Within Open RAN team, I'm now focusing more on the silicon part and the COTS DU evolution. Having said that, I am also co-chair in TIP Open RAN PG since last 6 years. So happy to work with Abdel on that, and nice to be a panel part for this Open RAN is progressing session.
Absolutely. Thank you to both of you. So I think we can kick things off for this discussion by addressing the title of the panel itself. So what is the current state of Open RAN progress or adoption?
Okay, I can go first on it, and let me have my answer more on the Vodafone side of the deployments. Vodafone has been always vocal about Open RAN technology and its potentials. We have been pioneering and we have been contributing to the industry since our joining in TIP in 2016, I would say, and even in the ORAN standards, which are there since 2018. We have been doing multiple trials earlier in rural networks, but we have come far in our journey. In UK specifically, we have already deployed commercial grade Open RAN network. We have announced the vendors. We are actually using ORAN compliant radios, the open interfaces from radios to the DU. We are deploying this in a containerized manner with cloud native software of the application from Samsung and on the container platform of Wind River, along with the COTS hardware, which is from Dell. We are very happy with the performance of the sites that are there, which are taking commercial traffic. And again, we are having a variety of configurations across 4G low bands, 4G mid bands, 5G mid bands, and 5G massive MIMO. We are happy with the KPIs on all the layers, be it about the call setup success ratio or drop call ratio, or even downlink, uplink throughputs across 4G and 5G layers. So Open RAN for us is a reality. Open RAN is strategic. We have also said about our plans of 30% European network by 2030. So we are progressing towards it. That is from the Vodafone side. I may hand it to Abdel, who can talk more on the industry side of the adoption.
Yeah, thank you, Devang. That was it's always nice to see operators adopting Open RAN and going forward with it. But I think if we take a step back, once Open RAN became something within the industry, that was towards the last decade, 2015, 2016, TIP was created, and then the ORAN Alliance was merged between the CRAN and the XRAN towards 2018. There was a strong momentum within the industry at that time. We can see the Open RAN deployments peak actually it reached its peak around 2020 with a year-on-year growth that was on it was just extraordinary, and then things obviously COVID maybe played part of it, but I'm not sure if it's the main reason. But after we've seen these kind of large deployments like Dish, Rakuten, even though it's a VRAN at that stage, but it could be considered as one of these kind of deployments, things did slow down, and then it went. Then we start seeing decline from an industry level on adopting Open RAN. However, this doesn't mean that the momentum is not growing, because I think it's not fair to measure everything in the number of deployments or commercial deployments. So last year, towards the end of last year, we've seen the strong announcement from AT&T and Ericsson that Ericsson is opening up its network architecture to Open RAN, primarily on the open front haul and on the SMO layer, or the non-real time RIC. So this is kind of progressing within the industry. We've seen a lot of recent deployments as we grow. There's just too many pilots going on worldwide. I wouldn't be able to cover them all, but I think there's just a few days ago, KDDI in Japan have announced its large-scale deployment that should start early next year. DT is piloting and in Germany, and that could translate into a large-scale deployment. There's the Vodafone Orange MORAN, or the RAN shared deployment. There's a Telus POC that happened a few months ago, and that can translate into a large deployment in Canada as well. So where we're at the moment, from an Open RAN, we shouldn't take it out from the whole kind of RAN expenditure. So if we see some of the latest reports, so not only speaking about Open RAN, but the actual RAN industry expenditure had dropped by 5 billion last year. And it's predicted to drop by an additional 3 billion this year. This is based on media. There is the traditional vendors are still dominating the market. We still in an oligopoly, and that would continue for some time, because the market share from these 5 leading operators are still dominating. And unfortunately, we're seeing actually that market share is actually growing rather than going down. So last year is actually grew by 0.6%, but it went up to around 95% from 94%. So the market that the Open RAN companies are working through is kind of still small, but and then obviously one of these big 5 is Samsung, and Samsung is part of the Open RAN journey as well. So I think what I would probably end this with, one of the forecasts from Dello Group, that the Open RAN journey will continue. They're expecting that 25% of the total global RAN market will be Open RAN by 2028. Now, this is on a global level, but outside of China, this could hit as large as 40%. So we could see that it will be progressing. Now, the downside of this is that the projections on the Open RAN for a single vendor will be the largest market share. So it's probably less than 10% of the overall Open RAN that would include multi-vendor RAN. But I think it is a journey. It's still an unsettled space. Things will be much clearer as we go ahead. There was a lot of promises from the beginning on what Open RAN is and how operators will be able to reap the benefits of Open RAN. But I think only time will tell how this would materialize.
Absolutely. Great information. Thank you to both of you. So to follow up on that, so what do you believe the key drivers were initially of the Open RAN adoption? You said it peaked around 2020 and then has tailed off recently. So what do you think was the key drivers initially, and what do you think the key drivers are now? Or perhaps what the challenges are with greater adoption facing the industry?
Yeah, okay. I can tell you from my position within TIP, and then maybe Devang can tell us more on why or how Vodafone is pursuing these key drivers. But I think I need to really say that there was a lot of hype going on in the industry at the beginning of Open RAN, and it was oversold. And it is and people or the industry had very high expectations. So everything I say now is things that can be realized, but it's not something that can be taken as granted. It would need a lot of technical expertise and organizations that would need to be agile enough to be able to adopt these kind of technologies. So I think one of the main key drivers is the vendor diversity and to avoid the vendor lock-in. Traditional vendors have a strong leverage towards the operators because in some instances it's a there's only one or two vendors, and the cost of changing a vendor for the operators is very significant, and that would keep the vendor locked in. So having a diversified of vendors and having disaggregated RAN components would, in theory, allow you to take the best of breed. So whatever components would be perform the best, you can have that. It would reduce the dependencies on these specific vendors, and then it will enable a multi-vendor ecosystem. I think the other element is the innovation and agility, because when you have this kind of diversity on vendors, then you would have a rapid innovation. So you would enable faster innovation between when you decouple hardware and software. Then you would have the AI elements of that. You would be able to deploy software-defined or programmable networks. You will be cloud native, and you would have virtualization amongst your network. So there's a lot of key drivers. And I think you would have a resilient architecture that would allow you to kind of put use cases forward, and you don't need to change your whole network onto that. So if you have a use case that comes up, either it's edge computing or even a private network or network slicing or an NTN element into that, you would be more flexible to kind of adopt them. It's not going to be easy, but at least in theory, you can do that. But the question comes then, it's much difficult to do it in practice than what was initially told.
Yeah, thanks, Abdel. I would echo what you said, but again, give a bit of different context to it. One is like the first point on vendor diversity. Definitely, that is what we were looking. So earlier, if you look back before 5 years, we were actually having 3 or 4 traditional vendors. And the lock-in aspect that you said was well applied, and that's why we couldn't actually do innovations with respect to, say, a features that is available in one particular vendor. If we want to give same features to our customers in a network which is deployed with other vendor, and we are at the mercy of the roadmap of that particular vendor. So innovation was restricted, vendor lock-in was there, vendor interoperability was not possible even within these 3-4 vendors, and that is why Open RAN had attracted the attention, where we were talking about disaggregation of hardware and software. Earlier, the RAN component of radio, DU, baseband software, which was supplied by one vendor. Now we see with Open RAN disaggregated hardware, we actually can have, say, 5 vendors on the radio space, maybe 3 to 4 on the DU space, and again software space. So now we are having, instead of those 3-4 vendors, a mix of 10-12 vendors, which we can again mix and match to develop a new stack. And that is where there were potentials, and Abdel, as you said, hype, but I would say that time would bring those efficiencies with respect to the cost benefits, because once we have these vendors develop their mature products and operator community gives scales to these vendors, the price points would meet efficiencies versus what the operators are spending as of now. So things would improve over time. There was one point where, Abdel, you were saying that we are seeing a slow phase, but I would say that now operators are more, earlier they were more looking and listening at the concepts, then they were looking at the POCs, but now they are actually doing field trials, and that is where a lot of time is spent. System integration is challenging, but we are also seeing very good collaborations across vendors, and integrating only the RAN part is one thing, and then integrating it with your OSS BSS systems, then actually doing all the performance in field, optimizing the network. That is where we are seeing that some more time is required. Again, having said that, it would be good overall for the ecosystem if more operators do these type of trials or commit to Open RAN and then share the learnings across the industry. So yeah,
absolutely. And you make a really good point there. Like it should have been sort of like an expected lull. I would like to say, like, people need to integrate the Open RAN technologies into their ecosystems. It's not going to go into commercial deployment immediately just because the AT&T announcement came out in December last year. So it's a normal part of the transition towards a more open ecosystem. And to follow up with the last point that Devang made. I think the question I have is around collaboration. So what role does collaboration amongst a variety of industry figures and players will play in accelerating the Open RAN adoption across the globe?
Yeah, collaboration is very important. I would say it is key to innovation in Open RAN. There are also multitude level of collaborations. There are things where we actually say that there should be policy and regulations wherein the governments, etc., should also put up some fundings, etc., and collaborate to foster the R&D side of the ecosystem. But let me just talk more on the technical part on collaborations between operators and vendors. What are the things that are essential, what we are already doing? In fact, I would say, be it TIP or be it ORAN, we all are contributing towards harmonizations of the requirements, and that is very key to the success of Open and Wide, because there are many small vendors coming out in this ecosystem, but they don't have a clear understanding of what are the needs of operators. Again, there are very diverse needs. There are very different roadmaps that the vendors may have to develop, and they would have to prioritize the requirements. And the collaboration between operators on sharing these requirements is very good, I would say, starting point. Over and above that, there are system integration challenges. If we look at a solution from a solution point of view, there are many opportunities in different plug fests and say OTIC labs, etc., where vendors can collaborate and showcase that their solutions are interworking. We know the standards are developed. We know vendors might comply, but then if I don't talk about tier 1 operators who are mostly doing all these things in their labs, if I talk about the majority of operators who are as of now looking and waiting to see the maturity, there it gives a lot of confidence when these type of collaborative activities are tested and proven, and they are also certified by some labs. So I think that would do away with a lot of work, a lot of fears that operators have before adopting Open RAN. So that collaboration is very much needed at a working level, technical level, and then there are other higher level collaborations at a policy level, or the frameworks that we have in TIP and ORAN, which are facilitating it.
Yeah, and if I can add to this, Larbi, the whole concept of Open RAN is based on collaboration. I could say that if there's no collaboration, or the collaboration doesn't reach the level that we are working towards, Open RAN will never be realized with its full potential. And the reason for that is that it's based on a multi-vendor stack, and there's no particular owner that can take an end-to-end solution and say that I own it all. I'm going to do all of the end-to-end testing, and I'm going to push it to the market. That single point of ownership that traditional vendors had doesn't exist today. Tier 1 operators would have the capability to do their own testing, but at the same time, it will just be the efforts will not be efficient if operators are repeating the same testings and doing the same things again and again. Because if you're a traditional vendor, you're just going to take your solution, or if it's a single vendor, you're going to take your solution and you're going to test it once, or not. I mean, you're going to have one stack, and then you would test it once and deploy many. We are trying to get this concept within Open RAN: test once and deploy many. And this collaboration, so the technical part of the collaboration that Devang spoke about is paramount. It needs to happen, from harmonizing requirements and then building solutions architectures, and then I think what's even more important is to create test plan baselines. So you would have a test plan and a baseline for this test plan that the industry, specifically operators, would agree on. But then they would need to agree on what the success criteria look like within these test plans, because this is quite different from a traditional kind of what single vendor deployment. A single vendor deployment, each operator would have their own KPIs that they can observe. But when it comes to Open RAN, what elements do you want to control? What elements do you want to keep it up to the service integrator or up to the vendors to do so? So it's more on having a baseline and a success criteria. And then I would even say the whole framework of certifications and badging becomes important as well, because there's no one single entity that owns the whole kind of solution. And we've seen this kind of collaboration, like the Accord Labs, we have the Orchid, the Valor, these are all in North America labs. We have the OTEX, we have the TIP community labs and the TIP authorized labs. And then there's just too many labs. And if these labs and industry alliances don't work together, then the effort can be just dissipated amongst what's happening. But I think on top of the technical aspects, there's another important aspect, which is the policy making, and that's very important for governments, regulators to come together and say, this is the direction we want to take. Now, there's only a finite effort that can be done in this direction, because the market needs to be open, competition needs to be open. But I think the regulation and rules are important to make sure that Open RAN can be facilitated. And the last thing is on knowledge sharing and best practices. So within these alliances, it's important to have the base of knowledge sharing amongst operators, because, and if we could probably cover that later on, but if we want to kind of drive tier 2 operators who were always depending on, or some of them at least, depending on the vendor to carry out their networks and deploy their networks and maintain their networks, but then they're going to go to the Open RAN, they wouldn't be ready to start measuring and testing the performance of the Open RAN solutions and maintaining that. So unless there's knowledge sharing and best practices that are open for these kind of operators, I think Open RAN will keep having this bumpy journey.
Absolutely. This is really interesting stuff. And you kind of segued into my next question about the different approaches tier 1 and tier 2 operators should take or can take in terms of adopting Open RAN. Is there anything else besides the testing side of things you believe that they should be looking at differently?
Well, so tier 2, I think the whole concept of breaking operators to tier 1 and tier 2, I think it's could serve the purpose, but I think we need to dig a bit deep into that. So we need to distinguish between brownfield deployments and greenfield deployments. So if you're a greenfield, if you're a new operator, even if it's a small operator, or if you are a FWA operator, a fixed wireless access point, and an ISP, a wireless ISP operator, and you want to deploy Open RAN, it would depend on your on what kind of skill sets you would have. But the thing is that running a network with Open RAN is totally different than having a network with a traditional RAN. In a traditional RAN, the skill set, if you're a tier 2 operator and you had traditional RANs within your network, you would potentially have a NOC, you would have RF engineers, you would have, all of these, the traditional way of the traditional generations, GSM 3G or even 4G on it. I think what's happening in RAN at the moment is this convergence between the RAN and the typical IT data center infrastructure. You would need to have skill sets that are more in addition to what the RAN offers, but you'll still need to have security. You would need to have DevOps. You would need to check the other elements of it. So I think this is where tier 2 operators can really step in by understanding that the way networks are managed in an Open RAN environment is a mixture between the previous RAN deployments, the traditional RAN deployments, and the actual core networks. I mean, we've seen this with the core networks a few years ago when the nodes within the core were bare metal and they had their own kind of nodes, and then everything went to a service-based architecture, and then these nodes just started to talk to each other. But then we need to make sure that know that the nature of a RAN is totally different than a core, because you would have in that lenses you would have distributed data centers across the regions, and then how would you be able to manage that and control that and automate many of the aspects that you're automating in the core network?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would like to add another aspect to it. So maybe not directly tier 1, tier 2, but I would say that there are operators who may have more risk appetite, and also they would have a strategy about the long-term transition. In fact, the main theme of this event, which is the transformation from telco to techco, is where, say, operators like us, Vodafone, we think that in the RAN space, Open RAN is an answer to being more techco focused, and that's why we have a higher risk appetite with the strategies that we have. We have taken bit bold steps in establishing our own labs specifically for Open RAN trials. We have also had our R&D centers in Malaga, where we are actually looking more and deep diving into the chipset part of it for long-term evolution. And we are also onboarding a lot of system integration activities within our organizations. So there has to be a lot of collaborations with vendors on setting it up. There have been some hard learnings. We have had a part of failures, but I would say that we have learned a lot. And this all requires a lot of investment and time and resources, even upskilling. If we now talk about, say, tier 2 operators or operators who are not willing to invest all these things, at least what they could do is that they could follow, say, contributing their requirements into RAN, into TIP. They can actually also onboard, say, similar stacks which are deployed by tier 1 operators, so their risk is low, especially on the integration aspect. And then there are other business models where actually tier 2 operators could actually fully have a SI partner who manages all the partners. So that is also one of the outsourcing model, or they can actually make one of the vendor as the lead SI, and then they can deploy their network. So that would be lower risk versus I think tier 1 operators are trying to learn all things and get things hand-on, have more controls on their network. Again, they may not want a dependency on a single vendor, which might happen when you follow the SI path. So this is how I see a difference between tier 1, tier 2. But having said this, the key thing is that if, be it you deploy on your own or be it you deploy through partner, if the interfaces are open, if the products are disaggregated, hardware software disaggregation is there, if the intelligence could be applied, the automation benefits that we would see later on coming as more matured from the SMO part, or the RIC accepts IRAPs, all those things are more important in this transition. So that is the
Absolutely.
way everyone should evolve.
Yeah. So sorry, Larbi, if I can just add to what Devang mentioned here, and this goes back to the collaboration question. Unless there's enough collaboration within the industry, and the tier 2 operators would not adopt Open RAN until they have the confidence that at least performance parity has been achieved. And to do that, they would need to have access to blueprints, performance test data, and information, because they will not be, or at least the majority of them will not be testing these kind of solutions in their own labs, just to kind of make sure that it works. Tier 1 operators, they are doing it now, but when it comes to tier operators, they want the industry to collaborate together, and they would need to see the proof for that. So that goes back to the importance of collaboration.
Absolutely. And you guys have done a great job of segueing me into my next questions very naturally. So thank you for that. But I think one of the key themes in a lot of your responses is the automation aspect of the Open RAN network. So how's the standards development going on for the ORAN specifications, for whether it be the SMO or the RIC, and how crucial will it be to, I think you've sort of addressed this, but to just emphasize how crucial will that development be for the overall Open RAN market?
The automation is very important. In fact, one of the points which Abdel was earlier saying is that overall cost efficiencies are not being realized right now when there is a comparison between Open RAN and TRAN. I don't know whether it is a single radio to radio comparison, or maybe the baseband comparison, or a software comparison. There are many different ways to look at it. But in the long run, there would be a lot of operational efficiencies which can be realized by the automation part, be it about the configuration part, or be it about the radio resource optimization part. And the standards are developing. They would have to be more mature. There would have to be more features, etc. Right now, we do have interfaces well defined in ORAN. The thing is that there might be vendors who might have the roadmaps for those interfaces. An example, there might be a DU software vendor who might have all the features similar to a TRAN vendor on the 3GPP side of the things on the vRAN software. But then if their interface towards the SMO is not developed, then that could be a bottleneck. Or if they have a delayed roadmap, then the testings could delay in that way. So the standards are there. Now, whether all the vendors are adopting it, whether they are adopting it at priority or there is a delay, that is where we see that things would mature with time. Even right now, we have some bespoke solution, maybe proprietary solutions, which can actually manage the overall Open RAN framework. There could be automations, there could be other efficiencies that could be brought forward. But over the time, the maturity of SMO, the maturity of the features and the tool sets would definitely give a lot of operational efficiencies, which would convert into TCO savings from an end-to-end perspective. So yeah, I think automation is key. It would mature, and we have seen these things with respect to the cloud native nature of applications on the core side or other business or enterprise side, and same things would be the key enablers even on the Open RAN side. That's my view. Abdel, maybe we can talk more even on this with respect to the tip, RIA Roma architecture, or anything that you would like to add.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Devang. I mean, I just resonate what you mentioned. Automation within Open RAN is not only key; it's the cornerstone of Open RAN. And I think Open RAN without automation wouldn't be feasible. And the reason for that, it's because there's just too many pieces together, and you would need to have something that can bring the whole solution into. I mean, when we speak about automation, this would cover the lifecycle management of the solution. That will cover the maintenance, even predictive or even self-healing maintenance. It would cover use cases as well as an AI element into it, because the non-real-time RIC is based on the SMO, which is covered or which is based on AI learning. Now, I think the major challenge here is that historically, this SMO layer within traditional vendors are proprietary, and it's closed. And some of them would have open APIs, but it's still a long journey we need to have to reach the maturity of that. And I think until now, the O-RAN Alliance has actually did a great job in introducing interfaces into that. So we have the O1 interface that is coming from the SMO layer to directly to the RAN. We have the E2 interface to the near real-time RIC. We have the A1, the policymaker, and then we have the interface that goes to the O Cloud, the O2 interface. So the interfaces are there, but they're not mature. They're far from being mature yet. And the reason they're not being mature, because there isn't enough momentum that you could unify these kind of interfaces together. And this is why, until now, I mean, DT, for instance, did announce a few years ago that they would have developed their own SMO layer within that, and then they think that if they develop it in-house, they would be able to control all of the automation aspects, and they will be able to be more flexible. And that's not the wrong approach. It's the operator strategy into that. So to reach the maturity within the automation layer, that will take a bit of time, but I think automation will be paramount, and an Open RAN solution without automation will, I would say, it would not even succeed.
Absolutely. I completely agree with both of you there. And to kind of close off this discussion, I'm just wary of time. We'll have a forward-looking question here, just to kind of see, what do you believe the next milestones are for the Open RAN market, and how you've mentioned how it might develop over the next few years, but like how integral do you think the open ecosystem philosophy will be to 6G standards going forward, even though we're at an extremely early stage right now?
Yeah, so the discussions on 6G have started. What I would say is that, as we were earlier discussing, that O-RAN standards O-RAN has been formed in 2018, and now we are seeing a lot of maturity on all the interfaces. That's why we see that there would be feeds both from Open RAN to 6G, and also O-RAN standards would continuously monitor that what are the things that are going in 6G, going to come in 6G, and what they can be ready at an interface level or at architecture level, which would continuously keep on enhancing O-RAN standards. And also, I would say that while O-RAN standards were not mature during 5G timeframe, by the time 6G matures, everything could be ready from an interface point of view, and 6G could be just an application that could be onboarded. There are many other things there. Again, when we talked about automation, then we can have more feeds from O-RAN to 6G, so that we could have say by the time 6G comes, we could have ZTP, zero touch provisioning, and we could also have AI ML in each and every component versus the limited AI ML functionalities that are developing right now. So there are many things that would be maturing in next few years, which could be adopted in 6G and vice versa. On the inflection point where you said that when we can see what would be the big milestone after which there could be more Open RAN adoption, it is again maturity of solutions, having automations, having products where there could be more of a plug and play kind of an integration, rather than operator needing to spend a lot of time for their own use cases. So we have standards, we have interoperable standards, but again, it is not in a plug and play form like what we may have, say, in a Wi-Fi kind of deployment. These are ambitions. When we will reach it, I'm not sure, but I think entire vendor community is working hard on it. All the Open RAN vendors, new Open RAN vendors, they are very ambitious, I would say, and they are giving their best. And this is how we see that Open RAN would give more confidence to operators who are as of now waiting, and maybe they are not entering the game. But once we have numbers from the deployments, scale deployments of operators, how they are being more efficient in terms of OPEX savings. When I say OPEX savings, it could be a lot of things. It could be about the resources that they are having in their organizations, how they need to cater or troubleshoot to the requirements, how they are doing it today versus which may take hours or days, which might actually be in minutes in the next phase of automation. So those are the efficiencies that would, I would say, encourage other vendors who are other operators who are not as of now onboarding Open RAN to join the Open RAN bandwagon.
Yeah, just to add to that very briefly, Larbi, if I may. I think the main key milestone within Open RAN is to agree on, is to limit the existing options within the specifications, because there's just too many options at the moment when it comes like to accelerators, when it comes to the O-Cloud infra, when it comes to even the open front hole. Getting an agreement on what requirements and what actual options will be, that would be an important milestones for early adoption of Open RAN to tier 1 and tier 2 operators, because there's just too many of them. And I think hopefully that things are being going in convergence. Now, in terms of 6G, what I would say, at the moment, the IMT 2030 proposal have included the ISAC and the integrated AI and communication. And I think the Open RAN would create a platform for to adopt these kind of services. And if you have them and you have an ecosystem, a vendor's ecosystem, then these will be easily be developed. So I think it's in the right direction. It is paving towards 6G, definitely. And because it's an open interfaces, then you would be able to get the benefit of the whole ecosystem working towards these 6G targets.
Absolutely. We'll field some questions from the audience here. So we've got a couple here. So first one is, so does the Open RAN mean more cost for managing NOC operations for a CSP? That's the first question.
Okay, I can probably just give a brief answer to this, Larbi. When you earlier asked me on the key drivers, I didn't bring TCO and on the mix, and the reason for that is that I think, in my view, Open RAN could be a real driver for savings, capex and opex, but it's not easy. And if you do it wrong, you will end up maybe even paying more than what you paid for traditional vendors, because it's not only on the cost of equipment, but it's on the cost for maintaining the network. And when it comes to this question, yes, if you don't do it right, it may cost you more. But if you do it right, if you are agile and you treat it like others who did it, and we've got life experience on data centers, how they're managing their own NOx and under SLAs, and they cost a fraction of what the operators are paying. So it could save money, but if you do it wrong, it could go sideways.
Yeah, and I would also agree in a way to this, that there could be newer tool sets that are required for managing, say, now the bigger mix of vendors. So there could be initial investment, but the key thing is that with the orchestration of the resources and automation and even self-healing side of the story, there would be overall efficiencies. And in a long term, it would be efficiencies. Maybe in day one, you can say that there could be additional investments in newer tools that would be required. But long term, it is efficiencies that what we are wanting.
Absolutely. I think we have time for at least one more question. So one of the questions here is, how is responsibility pinned for any critical failures in an Open RAN scenario? I think we kind of touched on it in terms of the strategies for different operators, but if we could just address it directly.
I think that's a great question. And this is one of the main problems that some of the operators don't want to go to a multi-vendor deployment. But bear in mind that an Open RAN scenario could mean that you're getting it from one vendor. Okay, so then the responsibility will be easily pinned down. But here's the options. Okay, there's an SI that comes into the mix, and then that SI will take the end-to-end responsibility, and then that would be clear who's responsible for that, or the one of the vendors of the Open RAN becomes the accountable party. However, the operator themselves can increase their skill set. And then they manage the network in a way they will be able to know where the failures are coming from, and then they will presume responsibility over their network, and then they will be able then to pinpoint the problem where it is. But I think this is definitely something that not all operators will be able to achieve.
Yeah, and maybe not all operator may achieve, but again, what I would say is that there are a lot of advanced tool sets, and we can identify where the problem is. And again, the vendors are very collaborative. They jointly discuss on things because there are interdependencies. In fact, we are already seeing and experiencing this in our UK network. But the troubleshooting that is coming out of the vendors is very nice. We are also having our own tool sets where we can identify where the problem lies. We do deep dives even into the platform sub-components of the hardware, be it on the GPP or be it on the container layer, or I would say issues that we can find through the application layer. So there are tool sets and there are methodologies. It could be done. Again, it is more about the intention and the resources that you would like to put, and whether you would like to have the SI part on your own. There are a lot of learnings that would empower operators with these deep dive analysis and in-housing of troubleshooting things.
Absolutely. So I think that's all we have time for. I'd like to say thank you to both of you again. This has been a really insightful discussion, and thank you to the audience for your questions.